Day 26, my oh my, are we marching along? Just like your hero is marching along, heading towards the climax, so are you. I'm so proud of you. Great job. Today's pages are preparatory to the climax. We are actually, for me, within the climactic set piece. This is what we are doing, this is what we're driving for. Everything is in service to the climax. Any bit of dialogue, any picking up of an item, any relationship dynamic that's happening is happening to serve our climax. I was just watching Divergent, and by God, everything that happens after we had the tent pole, we had the flight after, actually we didn't have a flight after tent pole, we had an exciting set piece after tent pole, and then we had some emotional resolution about the tent pole, and then we pretty much turned and stared down that climax and marched towards it. Even though many of the scenes didn't seem to have anything to do with the climax, they, on retrospect, aided the climax. So right now, shouldn't feel like you're at the climax. This should feel very natural. Whatever's happening should feel like, oh yes, of course, this is what's going on. But then when we look back, we will see that these were all stepping stones towards the climax. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about and don't think you can do that, just write organically, write the story as best you can, and then we'll figure it out in the editing process. Again, this is one of those things that until you really write the climax and really finish a book, it's hard to know what you should have done. This is a learning curve. I can't impress that on you enough. There's so many things that you just don't know yet that you wanted to have done to know to do them, and that's okay. This is part of the learning process. Let's get a book done so you know what a book feels like to be done, and then know how to plan your next book better. So today we are going to talk about setups and payoffs. I know some of you are shaking your fist at me that we should have talked about this much earlier. And that's okay. Again, if I told you everything you need to know, you would have been under the desk, just huddled in the fetal position. Setups and payoffs. The whole book is a setup and a payoff. The hero doesn't like to fight with his fists. He fights with his fists. Yeah, I mean, everything about the book is kind of a setup and payoff. But I'm talking about very specific things, and I wanted to talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. The scene where Captain Jack and the Orlando Bloom character fight in the blacksmith shed. This is a perfect example of a very quick setup and payoff. To give you an example, and that is when Jack first gets there, he has the manacles on, and so he takes a piece of metal, puts it in the fire, and then hits the donkey on the butt with it to get him to get the mill going so the mill could break his manacles. Okay, great. That was a great scene. Whatever. In our mind, it's over, right? But that was a setup, and that's the best setup, is when it doesn't feel like a setup. It feels like it organically happened in the story. We go through this long, sprawling fight between Jack and Orlando, and then at one point, a piece of metal gets put in the fire and is sizzling, and the donkey, of course, remembers that didn't go so well for him last time. I better get moving, and he starts to move and moves the mill, and that sets up a whole other action set piece. That was a setup. The donkey knows that hot metal hurts him, and he moves, and that moves, and so for us as the audience, we know that moves the machine. And then we have that sizzling metal, which sets up the same scenario where the donkey moves, and now we have the machine moving, and that completely changes the texture of the fight scene. That is a setup and a payoff that happen very quickly within 7 minutes of each other. Now you can have setups and payoffs that span almost the entire story. So if you're thinking of doing something and it's super cool, which it always should be super cool, and you didn't do this at all in the beginning, go ahead and pay it off. We will set it up later. Setup and payoffs are a skill set. To set it up properly in the beginning is a skill set that takes you several books, so don't freak out about it. And I still don't. I still pay stuff off. I didn't think of it. I just didn't have the idea. That coldness didn't come to me until later in the book, and then I go and set it up later. Just know that if you're going to pay something off, and especially if it feels like it comes out of left field, like let's say we didn't have that initial donkey slapping butt scene with Captain Jack, the donkey moving at the sound of the sizzling metal would not necessarily have made sense. It would have worked maybe, but it really worked because we saw the scene before to know why the donkey was responding the way the donkey was later in the fight scene when it was really necessary. So that's when you know you have to go and set something up. If the payoff just feels like it's coming out of left field, it's coincidental, it is random that this character has that item, has that skill set, has that emotional depth or shallowness, whatever you need. So that is how you set up and you pay off. Usually another really good setup and payoff is your training session should have been a preview to the climax and to the skills and weapons and that can be emotional. Skills and weapons that the hero needs later in the climax. Like if Beatrice at the end is all fighty and everything, unless she had that training session where we saw her learn these lessons and learn these skills, it would have felt a little odd for a little girl out of abdication to be able to kick butt the way she did. So that training session. Now, you may not have included some things in the training session that you need now. We'll set it up later. We'll go back and seed it. It's okay. Just know that you have to. That's the important thing, is that if you think of a cool idea and it's a little random and a little out there and you haven't really put it in the texture of the story, just make a note to yourself that you're going to have to go back and seed that. You might want to start a running list of all the stuff that you messed up that you're going to have to do. I do that mentally. I know, God, okay, never mind. I have to go put tails on a bunch of robots. Darn it. That is how this goes. So have fun. That's the other thing I really want you to do is in these moving forward pages as we move towards the climax, have fun. Even in a horrible drama, you should be having fun writing it, or why in the world are you writing this genre and this story, right? If you're not having fun, then fear, inner critic, affirmations modules for you. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow.